Let us pray. From our forests and parkland to our prairies and mountains comes the call of our land. From our farmsteads, towns, and cities comes the call of our people, that as legislators of this province we act with responsibility and sensitivity. Lord, grant us the wisdom to meet such challenges. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce a bill being the Local Authorities Election Amendment Act 1986. Mr. Speaker, this bill amends certain sections of the Local Authorities Election Act and, although minor in detail, are necessary for the fall elections of this year.
The honourable member for Calgary-McCall has moved first reading of Bill 36, Local Authorities Election Amendment Act 1986. Does the Assembly agree to this motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? Carried.
A bill being Local Authorities Election Amendment Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Nelson, is now read a first time. Tabling return.
Speaker, I move that Bill number 36 be placed on the order paper under Government Bills and Orders.
Having heard the motion by the Government House Leader, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, if any, please say no. Motion is carried.
Tabling returns and reports.
Speaker, I would like to file to the Legislative Assembly today two important reports which will add to the information base of all members. The first is entitled Field Investigation of Waste Disposal Sites, written by Associated Engineering, and the second is a document entitled Results of Investigations at Priority 1 Landfill Sites in Alberta, written by Alberta Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the Alberta Electric Energy Marketing Agency for the period 1985-1986.
Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the University of Lethbridge for the year 84-85.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased today to be able to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly two students from the Malmo School Daycare. During a recent visit to the Provincial Museum by the class, Mr. Speaker, these two students found a $50 bill. They were honest enough to immediately give that $50 to officials at the museum. Their honesty is a tribute to their parents, to their daycare leaders, and as well, they themselves have provided us with a good example for the whole province. Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that Alfie Bonacaso, his mother Elena, and Raphael Yosef and his mother Anna Rita, along with Connie Jorgensen of the daycare school Rise, from the members' gallery and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly and our thanks.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to add to the remarks and introductions of my colleague, the Minister of Culture, by introducing the children and staff from the Malmo School Daycare Center. And the staff members, along today with the children, are the Assistant Director, Peggy Coulter, and members of the staff, Joan Stebbings, Joyce Kuber, and Carl Alexandra. I would ask those staff members and the members of the class please to stand and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the last time a Premier of this province used the prospect of Western separatism to try to influence Ottawa, there were actually large separatist meetings occurring around the province, and of course the separatist was here in the legislature. Today in 1986, does the Premier have any objective evidence that he can table or refer to that shows that separatism is on the rise, or have those little birds been bothering the Premier again?
Mr. Speaker, I think it might be helpful for the honourable member if I provided him with the notes from which I made an address to the Canadian Bar Association yesterday, and he will notice that the way in which it was raised was in a manner more to show the potential that frustration may well lead to. And I think upon seeing the notes, he will feel that there was no particular need to try and provide additional support for that kind of a movement.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I'm not suggesting that the Premier is trying to advocate, but by bringing it up, it brings it back into the public domain. Surely the Premier is aware of that. And my question is, given that the Premier hasn't even gotten it together to give the Prime Minister a simple phone call to talk about our energy problems, why is he now stooped, I say stooped, to talking about separatism to try to get the attention of the Tories in Ottawa?
Mr. Speaker, the address which I made yesterday was on a national basis about a Canadian problem and has none of the implications suggested by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The supplementary question, maybe the Premier doesn't think it does, but many people in the province have been calling today. Surely he's aware of that you can't just go out and utter speeches and then say I was misquoted. My question then is to the Premier, that reports indicate that many Alberta MPs, MPs from the same party as the Honourable Premier, support Mr. Mass's unreasonable views about our energy problems. My question is it not the case then that the Premier is resurrecting the boogeyman of Western separatism because he can't even convince his own Alberta Tory MPs about the merits of his government's position?
No, Mr. Speaker, and I suggest the honourable member should not try and give reports to this legislature about people's positions when he doesn't know them. And if he can't substantiate that that's their positions, he shouldn't try and present them.
Mr. Speaker, I guess seeing the Minister or the Premier talking about on television, he was misquoted, and they put on a different guy to talk about on television. My question then to the Premier, in view of the problems that we're having with the federal government, before we start talking about separatism, would the Premier be prepared to endorse, for the sake of Alberta, an opposition candidate in the Pembina by-election to bring the message home to the federal government rather than talking about separatism?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition started the question on a foolish note and ended it on one.
Wes Logster.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, could he tell us how many ex-separatists or card-carrying separatists ran for the Conservative nomination in the last provincial election?
No.
Premier, relative to the support from Alberta members of Parliament, I understand that 2 out of 18 have made public statements in support of Alberta's position. Could the Premier indicate whether a meeting is planned with the chairman of the Alberta MP caucus, and is that soon? And are there more MPs that possibly support our position here in Alberta?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think any member should take a report that is a short report in the newspaper as something that represents positions of 18 MPs at all. I caution you that that's not wise. I know they don't do it intentionally, but it's surprising how often material in the media is incorrect.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Just to buzz off, and as the Premier seems to get misquoted. My question is to the Minister of Energy, and it has to do with the report yesterday tabled, I think, jointly by the Minister on the Federal Provincial Task Force on Western low-sulfur coal. And I would say it's great that they now support what the Alberta New Democrats and United Mine Workers have been advocating since 1983. But the report did highlight transportation cost difficulties, which we in the federal leader also, our federal leader, brought to the attention of the House of Commons in 1983. My question is, has the Minister of Energy or the Minister of Economic Development scheduled a series of meetings flowing from this report, scheduled a series of meetings with the railways and the federal government to explore ways to lower freight rates for our coal? And if not, when will they get around to doing that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think if the honourable member or honourable leader of the opposition go back further in time, he would find recommendations in this House which precluded the comments that he made, or he precluded the support of the group that he referred to. However, there have been a great deal of work done, there has been a great deal of work done in the last few years with respect to trying to develop coal markets and try to resolve the problems of getting Alberta coal into the Ontario market. I would think that it'd be more appropriate for the Minister of Economic Development to respond to some of the questions as it relates to transportation. In our department, there is considerable work being done, as well as work being done by the Alberta Coal Research Centre in Devon, and but most of their work is related to, as I understand it, upgrading the quality of coal and try to reduce the costs at this end so that we can become more competitive in that market in central Canada.
Mr. Speaker, I'd follow up supplementary to the Minister of Energy. It seems we may be running out of time because today Ontario Hydro has announced that it's going ahead with the completion of the very expensive Darlington nuclear power plant. So I would hope that that's not cutting into our markets. But given, Mr. Speaker, the sorry state of our oil and gas industry today, has the minister made any effort to draw to the attention of the federal government that assistance with the transport costs of our coal would create thousands of jobs in this province and in Western Canada, indeed?
First of all, Mr. Speaker, Alberta's proportion of the Ontario market is actually increasing in terms of coal coming from Western Canada. However, the overall demand, as the honourable member indicated, had been dropping. However, that doesn't mean that the potential is not there for the future. I think there is a great deal of potential for increasing our markets in that area. I'd also point out to the House, Mr. Speaker, that with the appointment of the Alberta Coal Development Advisor, since his appointment in December of '85, his top priority has been given to the implementation of trying to get Ontario officials together to discuss the greater use of Alberta coal in those markets. And in reports I'm receiving from Mr. Page, the advisor, is that the Ontario officials, and I'm sure he's talked to other people across the country as well, and he's encountering very great cooperation in these activities.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. We always hear about great cooperation and how things are going along, but my question then is simply this. With the announcement today by Ontario Hydro about the Darlington nuclear plant, What assessment has the minister made of this in terms of trying to sell our coal in the future that he talks about?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I already indicated, the coal advisor is doing considerable amount of work in this area. The first stage of his work is to be completed by the end of the summer, and I'll be hearing from him by the end of the summer the progress he has made, and we can go on from there.
Mr. Speaker, that's great. We're lovely studies. But the point I was trying to make is they made this announcement today, the day after we came out with this report about the nuclear plant. But let me try something else to see how federal provincial cooperation with our MPs again. Has the minister asked our Alberta MPs, specifically Mr. Mazikowski, who's now the Deputy Prime Minister, what has he done in terms of lobbying them to try to bring this about with Ontario Hydro?
Mr. Speaker, the report came out yesterday. We have officials working in the department to address the market situation at the other end. We have a coal research center looking into new technologies. A great deal of work is being done. And as a follow-up to this report, we'll be taking every step we can to try to increase our markets there.
Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, to supplemental to the Premier, reports yesterday, but the internal draft was out, and you had a committee appointed just December. Did you raise the issue in the recent federal provincial talks, recent provincial premiers talks?
I'm not the Premier.
Not the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there was a great deal of discussion about resources. We didn't deal specifically with this report.
Supplementary, member for Pincher Creek, Crow's Nest.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Energy, given the recommendations of the Low Sulphur Coal Task Force to pursue developing and demonstrating advanced coal quality enhancement technologies, will the Minister request the Office of Coal Research and Technology to expedite the research in this area, particularly the development of a pilot plant coal upgrading facility which has the potential of making Alberta coal more competitive in domestic and international markets?
So, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the Office of Coal Research and Technology are doing considerable research in the coal combustion technology area and upgrading the coal through different research projects, also working with the Alberta Research Council. With respect to the specific proposal the honourable member mentions, certainly I think it's something that this particular office should investigate further and pursue if it has the potential.
Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, this is to the Premier. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Premier in this province insulted every Albertan by suggesting that there's a swelling of support for Western separatism within this province. Now, Albertans are dedicated Canadians, and they resent the suggestion that Albertans might separate them. Now, to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, why has he taken the irresponsible step of raising the spectre of Alberta's separation from Canada at this time?
Yeah, honourable member, that was the substance of the question. Was the first question was raised by the Leader of the official opposition, and we can't have the same matter arising twice in the same day. Point of order will have to come at the end of question period, honourable member, but...
Do you mean to say that we can't bring it up the rest of the year? The rest of the session?
No.
It's a different question.
Honourable member, as the chair has heard, the question is basically the same question as raised in the first question by the Leader of the Opposition. If you have had a few moments to think of a new way to phrase this question, the chair would listen to that, but it's with a great deal of difficulty. And the chair made no comment about the issue not being raised again, but not twice in the same question.
Then, Mr. Speaker, would the Premier comment on his misquoted report of separatism yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, the address which I made, I believe in and stand behind, and the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon can have a copy of the notes for those remarks. I'd be pleased to have him read them and then decide whether he wants to pursue the matter further. But the remarks which I made, I stand behind strongly.
Some separatists slapping tables there. To the Premier, Mr. Speaker, when is he going to accept the fact that the breakdown in relations between Ottawa and Alberta is as much a result of his government's incompetence as it is of the federal government's intransigence?
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously I reject the honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon's position completely. I think the government of Alberta has established, not just recently but over the years, a remarkable record of dealing with federal-provincial relations, and we continue to do that in the future.
Remarkable is hardly the word I think of, but Mr. Speaker, and to the Premier, again, when is he going to change to a more productive approach for dealing with federal government? Albertans want results, not mere words.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans are getting results.
Speaker, to the Premier, I have a suggestion. How, for starters, for example, when is the Premier going to get rid of his Minister of Energy and put someone in there that's competent to do the negotiating?
Main question, Leader of the Representative Party. The member for Calgary Mountain View.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Solicitor General. Could the Minister indicate what the current status is in terms of the ALCB, the Alberta Liquor Control Board, negotiations at this point?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not personally involved in negotiations, as this is a Crown corporation, has their own management structure and mandate. However, I'm advised that the issue is down to salary and job security, and that the next few days hopefully will bring results and settlement of the strike.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to either the Minister of Labour or to the Solicitor General, at present some 600 employees of the board have ignored their union leaders and gone back to work. My question is, and the Alberta Union of Public Employees is threatening fines and removal of union membership for these people. My question to either the Minister of Labour or the Solicitor General is this: is the maintenance of union status necessary for these workers to retain their jobs?
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member is asking a question that has to do with the content of the Labour Act, in that where a union is certified as representing the employees, then unless an individual has got some religious scruples, they should join the union. Even if they have those scruples, which are recognised on occasion, then they still have to pay the union dues as they derive the benefits of the activities of the union in negotiating with management.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister. Could the Minister indicate whether any of the Liquor Board employees have made representation to the Department with regards to their desire to terminate their association with AUP, the Alberta Union of Public Employees?
Mr. Speaker, not that I'm aware of. I have received no such representations, nor to my knowledge of the Department.
Mr. Speaker, a final supplementary to the Minister. In the review of the provincial government's labour laws, will the Minister or the government be receptive to legislation guaranteeing Albertans the right to freely seek employment without union membership being a barrier?
Mr. Speaker, I'm anticipating, in view of the broad-ranging inquiry that the committee is going to hold, that there will be all kinds of proposals will be put to that committee, and it will be up to the committee to consider them. What the results of those considerations may be, of course, it's not up to me at this time to anticipate.
Supplementary, member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Well, Solicitor General, was wondering why the minister does not move to require its agencies and Crown corporations to set up joint management labor committees in order to work out these difficult job security problems, in order to set a precedent of cooperation for labor relations in this province.
Mr. Speaker, the labor relations between the ALCB and AUPE have been generally very convivial, and I think it's 6 years ago, if my memory serves me right, that there was some sort of labor differential, and in view of that reason, I have not personally seen any reason for implementation of such a committee or panel as the honourable member for Buffalo has mentioned. I'm more than willing to take that matter into consideration and see if it is worthwhile, but I would like to advise the Assembly that I'm quite happy with the relationship that ALCB and AUPE have at present. I'm sure that within the next few days, settlement of this rather minor dispute will be overcome.
Albert.
General, Mr. Speaker. Could the Solicitor General indicate to this Assembly whether the ALCB is going to supply health and pension coverage to its casual employees?
Mr. Speaker, I have no idea on that. As I mentioned, I'm not an integral part of the management of ALCB, and I believe that's probably a matter that is being presently discussed between the union and the board.
I suppose so. Member for Calgary Mountain View, followed by the member for Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Manpower. Yesterday in the Assembly, the Minister stated he had no information that provincial government departments are eliminating jobs and replacing them with PEP and STEP positions at lower wage rates. I'd like to table a letter which I have indicating that in the fall of 1985, 30 temporary staff earning $9 an hour were laid off at the Terrell Museum in Drumheller, and within weeks were replaced by 30 people hired under the PEP program for $5.50 per hour. My question to the Minister, does this constitute an abuse of the PEP program?
Mr. Speaker, so the honourable member knows, the Department of Manpower does not place PEP or STEP students, or does it proactively place any people under its program. As I indicated yesterday, we are not in the business of making jobs in the Department of Manpower, Mr. Speaker. We're an extension of economic policy, and we work closely with the private sector and with various departments. Various departments, as the private sector, approach the department and make requests for students under our programs. We review the applications, making no judgment on the applicability of those jobs. So I think that may clarify the confusion that the member for Mountain View is belaboring under.
Well, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, and I'm just referring to those STEP and PEP programs under the provincial government departments administered through his department. Does he have in place any safeguards to prevent the provincial government departments from simply using these programs to get public service employees at cheap wage rates?
Mr. Speaker, I just said about 15 seconds ago that our department does not pass judgment on the purpose for which the jobs that are placed under PEP and STEP make. It's our decision, it's our role to make available wage incentives, wage subsidies, and under the various programs, and we'll continue to do that. And certainly, I would say that that may be an interesting item for debate, and Mr. Speaker, and I'd be willing to participate in that debate.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone will argue with the importance of job creation or job training programs, provided they're used for that purpose. So my question again or another question is supplementary to the Minister. When a provincial government department continues to hire and rehire repeatedly for the same positions under STEP and PEP? Is there any monitoring or follow-up done to ensure that that department is not abusing or misusing the original intention of these programs?
For the third and final time, Mr. Speaker, we do not make decisions about the applicability of applications to the Department of Manpower. Now, I would suggest to the honourable member, if he has specific concerns about the placement or the use of PEP and STEP students within the government department element or in the private sector, I would be pleased to review it with my colleagues. You know, our department has assisted in one way or another 460,000 people over the last year, Mr. Speaker, and we're very pleased about that record. That's the role of Manpower Department. That's the role and the intention of the PEP and STEP programs and the wage subsidies. And I can assure you, as long as I'm minister, that will continue to be the case.
Well, Mr. Speaker, does the minister have any concerns that these programs may in fact be abused or misused by other provincial government departments? Does he have any concern that that might in fact be taking place?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Mr. Speaker, can the Premier or the Minister then tell us who in the government would be responsible to see that this does not happen within government programs?
Mr. Speaker, obviously, a minister is responsible for departments.
Member for Calgary Buffalo, followed by the member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Social Services. In Calgary last week, a judge said that he was puzzled why Alberta Social Services hadn't stepped in long ago to remove two 8- and 11-year-old Native girls from the custody of their abusive uncle. A pastor of the Church of God states that he wrote to the then Social Services Minister last November but received no reply. On August the 8th, he wrote directly to the current minister. Has the minister conducted an investigation into this case in order to determine why Social Services did not act on complaints going back some 2 years?
Mr. Speaker, as always, when one is discussing cases with respect to possible abuse of children, they're very sensitive and highly confidential, and on a regular basis information comes to not only staff but to the minister's attention that deals with just such cases. And we are not privy, if the honourable member understands the Child Welfare Act, to discuss those cases in public with either the people who have registered the complaint about possible abuse or others. And I can only say to the honourable member, obviously, when any cases are brought to our attention, they are thoroughly investigated.
Thank you. Is the minister aware of complaints from schools and other institutions that Social Services is often slow to respond to the needs of neglected and abused children?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there again, partially because of the fact that indeed we're dealing with highly confidential information relating to the children, the people who raise the concerns, quite appropriately so, are not told of the investigation that is going on. And I imagine that in some cases, because they are unaware of an investigation, they may not realize that in fact something is happening.
Are any, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, are any changes planned to legislation or Social Services Department procedures in order to restore a balance to the process?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to receive the honourable member's representations with respect to the Child Welfare Act. We believe it's an excellent piece of legislation. However, that doesn't mean that it can't be improved. And I do receive a lot of correspondence just on this very vein from people who have raised concerns and are not aware of their outcome. And again, as the honourable member has mentioned, we are talking about a balance, and if the member has some representations, I'd certainly be pleased to receive them.
Mr. Speaker, is the minister saying that they are not planning any current changes to legislation or Social Service Department procedures in that respect?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the procedures are very carefully, as a result of the Child Welfare Act, mandated for us in terms of investigation and, in fact, in terms of reporting that must be done by people outside the department. And at this point in time, we believe appropriate procedures are in place, that matters are handled expeditiously. I certainly have reviewed all cases that are brought to our attention, and with respect to the specific case that has been mentioned, I think the honourable member, if he reads also the complete press reports, he will be aware that in fact the judicial system was a party to placing the children in the first instance, and that was a procedure prior to the case that came forward.
Member for Edmonton Avonmore, main question, followed by the member for Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche.
Supplementary. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Social Services, would she comment on her policy of least intervention in families as possibly hindering and hampering both the investigation and intervention by social workers in these kinds of cases?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the kind of intervention I believe that all of us would abhor is the kind that immediately separates children from families. And the type of intervention that is absolutely necessary is to provide the resources after an investigation to the family so that the most appropriate steps can be taken to secure the children and secure the family unit.
Main question, member for Edmonton Avonmore, followed by the member by Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education, more than 25,000 students, particularly in rural Alberta, depend on the Alberta Correspondence School for courses. Normally, catalogues for courses for the coming year would be distributed by midsummer, so registration can be completed and materials received early in the fall. Could the Minister of Education confirm that the catalogue this year will be not available for another 2 weeks?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take that question on notice and report back to the House.
Mr. Speaker, people calling the correspondence branch have been told that there may be a 2-week delay and that there will be fee increases in the coming year. Could the minister confirm this, if this is the case, and if so, indicate what the increases will be?
As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, I will report back to the House.
Mr. Speaker, to the minister, has she consulted with her bureaucrats in regard to fee increases?
I will report back to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Also consult with school personnel and municipalities to see what, in fact, would be the impact of school correspondence branch course increases.
Member for Athabasca-Lac-La-Biche, followed by the member for Edmonton Highlands.
Mr. Speaker, to the Associate Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, on Monday, the only reason the Minister of Agriculture would give for the low participation of the cow-calf producers in the red meat stabilization plan was the current high calf price. But producers were not signing up prior to the June 30th deadline either, even though prices were not rising then. In fact, there were no calves on the market until very recent days. Could the minister confirm the real reason producers are not signing up? Is it because they do not think the program is fair to them?
Mr. Speaker, I certainly cannot confirm that. In my discussions with producers, when they understand the program, they do believe it's fair. If you take a look at the cow-calf portion of the program, which is based on a 10-year average, you'll find that the first couple of years in the average are the lowest. And I believe this year's average price would be about between 85 and 86 cents base across Canada, and that in the next few years that average would rise because the low averages of 1976, 77 when it started to go up would drop out of the average, so the price is going to increase. And this last week calves sold, I suppose this is only the odd circumstances, but calves sold in the Edmonton public stockyards for as high as $1.34 a pound. Certainly producers expected that rise, and my information is that the reason the majority of them didn't sign up was because they expected good prices this fall. Even at that, I believe it would be a good investment to carry assurance.
On Monday, the minister talked vaguely about a 35 to 45% sign-up in the CalCAF program. Could she be more accurate and indicate if the figures represent the percentage of producers or the percentage of animals enrolled in the program?
No, Mr. Speaker, I can't.
Take it on notice. Like the Farm Stability Program, the producers do not like the things, are saying that the program are not as rosy as what the minister indicates it is. What is the minister being told, as both of them talk directly with organizations representing CalCAF producers, about the reason they see for the low participation, besides the high prices? Has there been other presentation about changing the plan?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker. There's always representation to make a government program a little bit richer. And we've had representation from some producer organizations that say the plan is an excellent program and that it will meet the needs of the cow-calf producer. We've had other producers who have said that it isn't sufficient and that they would like a much richer program. At the same time, out of the other side of, on the other hand, I shouldn't say it the way I was going to, they recognize that if the program's too rich, you have to have production controls or marketing boards. And from my discussions with both those groups and the producers, nobody wants that.
One of the thing that farmers bring up is the fact that it's not based on the cost of production type of program. What analysis has the minister done regarding the fact that the cow-calf program bears little resemblance to the cost of production program like the pork stabilization program, which is very welcome by the farmers, the hog producers in Alberta?
If the member means on a personal basis, we've raised cattle for 28 years. But if he's talking about the analysis on from the department or departmental standpoint of view, yes, analysis have been done on whether it's feasible to do it on cost of production. The problem is on whose cost of production. Is it on my cost of production or your cost of production or the members from Brooks' cost of production? I mean, there's a whole variation in the. In hogs, it's much simpler. You know how many bushels of grain hog eats to reach market weight, and it's a lot simpler to come up with a cost of production. But in Alberta, in the cattle-producing areas, the variations are so widespread, and the farming practices of the individual farmers and their costs are very, very different, and it's an almost impossible level to reach without making it so terribly rich for one farmer that he can put the poor one out of business.
Supplementary member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Associate Minister. In her concern for oversupply, would she not admit that the government is shaving the cost cost of raising beef down too far and just helping the big producers and squeezing out the small ones?
No, sir, Mr. Speaker. If you take a look at the 86 cent, if farmers had gotten 86 cents across the board last year, they would have been fairly well satisfied. And every year, when this year's price is worked into the figure, the support price will increase. And if you can guarantee 86 cents for this year on 100 cows for a $700 investment, it's a pretty good investment. Fortunately, this year you won't have to use it. And members must realize that the 86 cents is market neutral, so it isn't quite as rosy as it appears on first blush.
Main question, member for Edmonton Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to address my question to the Minister of Culture. It's my understanding that the Cabinet Committee on Cultural Heritage, which includes ministries of a number of departments, is now getting close to 2 years old. I wonder if the Minister can report on what new programs or policies have come from that committee.
Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet Committee on Cultural Heritage is in existence and has met. The committee has been looking at a number of suggestions which are there for the long term. The results of those deliberations will eventually be in this House, and we'll have an opportunity to debate and discuss them at that time.
Well, thank you. Mr. Speaker, then I'd like to ask if the Minister plans to have any discussions, possibly with the Minister of Recreation and Parks, but specifically with the organizing committee for the Calgary Olympics to ensure that there's adequate representation of Alberta's ethnic population in the Olympic ceremonies and other events for 1988.
Mr. Speaker, that's a good question. We have, in fact, discussed that possibility. I do sit on the Cabinet Committee on the Olympics precisely to ensure that the cultural component, both including the multicultural aspect and others, are represented. We have been considering possibilities for that event in the city of Calgary, and we'll continue to discuss those both in the Committee on the Olympics as well as between ministers and among the department staff responsible in that particular area.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. There's another concern within ethnocultural communities in Alberta with respect to racial intolerance. I wonder if the Minister of Education would announce if she's planning to table a government response to the Gitter report on tolerance and understanding.
Mr. Speaker, that's a very important question, and I think it is to the credit of this government and this province that we moved on the establishment of the Committee on Tolerance and Understanding, and was a very difficult exercise, I would say, but made some very, very important recommendations. One of those recommendations, which I'm taking a careful look at, is the question of monitoring the curriculum within the private school system in this province. And that monitoring is going on, as I've indicated on several occasions in this House. There were some recommendations in the Gitter report which are part of my overall view, and in fact my response to the Gitter report will be part of the new School Act, which I hope to bring forth next spring, 1987. While I'm on my feet, I would like to also point out that the Committee on Tolerance and Understanding gave a strong endorsement for public support of private schools in this province, and I guess I don't quite understand the position taken by the parties opposite that there be no public support for private education. We have a very important system in this province, one that supports the option by parents, and we also have a very strong focus on the 97% of students who are in the public system.
Well, that's right. A supplementary question to the Minister then. Will the Minister please table a formal response on behalf of the government with respect to its policy for private schools and the public funding thereof in the context of the Gitter report?
Mr. Speaker, our support for private schools in this province is very clearly documented not only in informational material to the public, but also in regulations governing those private schools. With respect to a final response on the Committee on Tolerance and Understanding, because already some of the recommendations in that report have been acted on, and we're working with both the Alberta School Trustees Association and the Alberta Teachers Association with respect to some other recommendations, but a final and government policy statement, I would say, would have to wait the introduction of a new School Act in the future.
Supplementary member for Calgary-Buffalo.
To the Honourable Minister of Education, is there any possibility that the government might consider enacting a requirement that there be compulsory education on tolerance and understanding for each child in this province in all schools, rather than leaving it to the discretion of individual schools as at the present time?
Well, I'm very pleased to hear the endorsement by the member for Calgary-Buffalo for the new secondary school curriculum, because in fact within that curriculum is a very important portion on health and life management skills, which will have a very important focus on the importance of the individual and will in fact recognize this government's strong endorsement for racial tolerance in our province.
Thank you. Member. Time for question period has expired. Orders of the day. Might the Assembly agree to reverting to presenting of petitions? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Member for Drumheller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to present the following petition that has been received for a private bill. The petition of the Board of Trustees of the Canadian Native Friendship Centre building for the Board of Trustees of the Edmonton Canadian Native Friendship Centre building, Amendment Act 1986.
Having heard the motion by the honourable member for Drumheller, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, if any, please say no. Motion is carried.
Mr. Speaker, I would move that question 169 and motions for return numbers 158, 163, and 165 stand.
Having heard the motion by the Government House Leader, those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, please say no. Motion is carried.
Question 166 of Ms. Melsness.
Mr. Speaker, I move that motion 168